Hey everyone, welcome back, and don't mind me. I'm trying to get into new hobbies. This one, scummering. I meant scalping. I'm currently waiting for the next big release by Apple, the big company, Granny Smith. Oh, wait a minute guys, it's really second!
Yep, turns out I did not need to wait. They were only selling them digitally. The physical video game, aka my pride and joy. Trust me, my standards are very low. Oh, how much enjoyment I get out of these, the box art, the manuals. Whoa, what is this, a coaster? Ah, yes, of course, the actual game, something I can hold in my hands. Who needs a woman when I have burnout? Ever since the days of the Atari 2600 and later NES, the idea of a game being on one thing just became the standard. However, problems started as games started to get bigger and bigger and they could no longer fit on these cartridges. After all, if I can't hold 4.7GB worth of data, then how could 30-year-old plastic? That's where CDs came in, first used by the TurboGrafx CD. First used by the Sega CD or Mega CD, an add-on for the Mega Drive/Genesis that allowed it to play CD-based games like Sonic CD, Night Trap, Jurassic Park, and that was it. It was so successful that they went back to cartridges for the Sega 32X, which was also so successful they went back to CDs for the Sega Saturn. Okay, jokes aside, the Sega CD wasn't bad. It was ahead of its time in a lot of places. Of course, CD-based games, movie-like experiences, by just showing movies, and long loading times. Yeah, that was the issue with the Sega CD's catalogue. A lot of the games were just movies with button inputs popping up every now and then. They were essentially just quick time events games. During this time as well, Nintendo was working with Sony to create a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo, the PlayStation. However, after Nintendo looked at the contract and noticed a lot of funny business, and pulled out. Like my last relationship. She didn't like me holding burnout for too long. With the Sega Saturn, CDs were back, but wait a minute, here comes Sony with the PlayStation, also using discs. This must mean Nintendo followed suit, right? It only makes sense. Yeah, sure, let me ask Nintendo. Hey Nintendo, discs, right? Hold up. This is the 5th time they put me on hold this afternoon. Yeah, Nintendo decided to stick with cartridges. Why? I don't know, they felt like it. Nintendo sticking with cartridges may not have been the only reason they lost this generation, but it sure contributed to it. The thing is, while cartridges were faster and more durable, then look at them funny CDs that could hold more data and were far easier to produce. Just buy some blank CDs and you're set. That's why it's so easy to play pirated games on the PS1, just burn Crash Bandicoot onto a CD. The N64 cartridge could only hold 64 megabytes of data as opposed to the PS1 CD holding 700 megabytes. Then the PS2 came along with DVD allowing 4.7 gigabytes of data as opposed to 700 megabytes. The Xbox used DVDs, the GameCube used mini DVDs. Yeah, let's not talk about Nintendo at the moment. However, the Xbox also introduced Xbox Arcade, which allowed you to download multiple arcade games over the internet. Mom! Get off the Wi-Fi! I'm trying to download Dig Dug! This changed everything, and little did we know what the next generation had in store for us. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 generation, infamous for Sony fucking up so badly Xbox One. The generation infamous for Sony fucking up so badly when Microsoft fucked up more, so Sony won. On the Xbox and PlayStation Store, you can now buy games digitally, and we're not talking smaller games like Dig Dug, we're talking AAA releases, Call of Duty, Battlefield, GTA, all on the store to be downloaded to your console without even leaving your bedroom. Oh, how could I forget, you're a gamer, you don't do that anyway. And we're not talking a bit later, we're talking day one release digitally as well as physically. This is amazing, who needs to go outside anyway? The option is now there, which is amazing, and at the end of the day, not everyone wants a wall of virginity, some people have lives. And that I will never understand. During this generation as well, on PS3, we switched to Blu-ray discs, meaning they could hold more data than ever before. On the Xbox 360, games that required an install disc only required one disc on PlayStation 3. The age of choice when buying a game was upon us, as you could buy a game physically, or to save some physical room, you could buy them digitally, which you wouldn't have to worry about the disc not working. As well as during this generation, companies decided to start requiring an online pass to play games online, and if if you bought the game used, then the code could have already been redeemed, or just not included in it at all. With a digital copy, you didn't have to worry about that. Well, this all sounds amazing. Who needs this when it can all just be on my console, without me having to get off my lazy ass to put the disc in? Well, you see, there are some consequences here. While game sales do happen on these stores, there is nothing like the prices you could get the game physically at. For example, Payday 2 on the PS3 store, you're looking at around £30, while buying it physically, you're looking at about £1.50. So both options have their merit. Do you want convenience or price, yet alone storage? During this generation, the whole game would actually fit on the disc, which was a real good thing, as this generation was when file sizes drastically increased, since the launch PS3 was only 60GB for the higher model, and some Xbox 360s were only sold with 4GB of storage, so this was a big deal. And of course, the lack of actual ownership. Buying a digital copy only meant you had the license to the game, not actually owning it. Unlike the physical game, you actually own. I can share this with a friend, parade it around town, sacrifice it to the goat gods, and sell it for money to buy a new game. You can't do any of that with a digital copy. So both have their pros and cons. With digital, it's all about convenience, unlike with physical, where it's less convenient, but you overall get a better deal both figuratively and literally. But hey, none of that matters, we still have choice. When you have that, nothing can go wrong. Other than the fact that I bet this house on red. During this generation, however, we saw the rise of digital-only games. Luckily, these were mainly smaller games, and moving into the PS4 and Xbox One generation, none of this changed. We still had our options, plus Xbox was now using Blu-rays, meaning physical was just getting better and better. Or was it? One of the staples of the physical video game is the manual. This little booklet in the early days would explain characters, controls, and the plot of games, and in cases like The Legend of Zelda, the manual was like a mini strategy guide. However, by the PS4 and Xbox One generation, they were basically gone. Granted now, by the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, they weren't really necessary, and by the end they were essentially just displaying the controls, but by the PS4 and Xbox One generation, you'd be lucky to even have that. Tell me, when was the last time you got a PS4 or Xbox One game that even had a controls guide? Now, why don't you see them anymore? Well, I was gonna say deforestation, but the internet is probably the appropriate answer. Yes, the internet made instruction manuals all but worthless, as you could just look up any information that you needed online. In the place of manuals, we mainly got ads, maybe some DLC stuff, and by the PS5 and Xbox Series generation, manuals were basically extinct. But hey, at least games were still on a disc. Even over at Nintendo, the games were still on the Wii U disc and later Nintendo Switch cartridge. Right? Not always. During the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, some companies started experimenting with physical digital games. Basically, you get the box, the manual of the game had one, but the game itself would just be a download code for the digital version. Basically meaning, this box is worthless. Now, like I said, this was just an experiment. This was when digital was starting to become a prominent thing, so companies wanted to try and combine both forms of media, which, unsurprisingly, didn't work. Why would you buy this? This doesn't save room on the console, it takes up physical space. You can't get it cheaper because it's a one-time redeemable code, so you can't sell it or buy it physically. This is just pointless, just buy it digitally at this point. But luckily, of course, this wasn't the end of physical media, but companies sure kept trying. Microsoft started selling the Xbox One S, all digital edition. At Xbox One, that doesn't support discs. Call in the guards because the bullshit meter's going off again. What was the point of this? Just buy a regular Xbox One. You'd be saving money in the long term buying used games. This is dumb. It's not like it was much cheaper than a regular Xbox One S. Even then you could buy a used one for cheaper. This is like when Sony released the PSP Go, a all-digital PSP. But at least that made more sense. It was a handheld. Carrying around a PSP plus games could be a pain. This had no excuse. And when the next generation came out, we saw the PS5 All Digital Edition and Xbox Series S. Both fully digital consoles, no disc drive, no nothing. This one thing showed the downfall of physical media. At least Nintendo could save us, right? Right? The Nintendo Switch used cartridges, which meant three things. They were more expensive to produce, they held less data, and to get cartridges that held a lot of data was as expensive. So then, how did companies get around this? Yeah, just put a test receipt in the box, who cares, they'll buy it anyway. Bring in the physical digital game. However, they also released some games where part of the game was on the cartridge and you had to download the rest. Doom 2016, for example, the actual campaign was still on the cartridge, but the multiplayer had to be downloaded separately. I think in this case it's fine, most people were buying Doom for the single player anyway. Then you have the Mega Man Legacy Collection 1+2. Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 was on the cartridge, while 2 was a download code. Now this is bullshit. You could have fit both games on a 4GB cartridge, which is the cheapest option. They could have made the ultimate Mega Man collection and combined both of them, make a unique menu, but no, they decided to do this. Keep in mind here, Mega Man Legacy Collection 2 is the bigger game. Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 is less than a gigabyte, while 2 is 3.2. Why not put that one on the cartridge? At that point, just buy them both digitally. You're not saving any room, and if you really need that 345 megabytes of data, just delete some screenshots. Now, Nintendo released an update later for the Switch that allowed one cartridge to show multiple games, which I'm sure they would have used had it been an option back then. But still. Then you have cases like the Resident Evil triple pack where only Resident Evil 4 is on the cartridge, LA Noire is barely on it, yet it's still required a download. The Batman Arkham games, 2 out of the 3 games are downloads, but you still need the cartridge in the system to play them. Fortnite? Well, if you're buying Fortnite physically, I think you deserve to be scammed. These releases are just lazy and cheap. You could get a cartridge that could fit the game, and when the Switch 2 came along, it got a whole lot worse. The Switch 2 introduced the game keycards. Basically, you put it in the Switch 2 and you download the full game. Now, to play devil's advocate here, the game keycards is really no different to discs on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, as you have to download basically the whole game on here as well, but still. And this is where we're at. Luckily, it can't go any further downhill than this, right? Wait, hold a minute, give me a second. Hello? What do you mean I have chlamydia? GTA 6 is one of the most anticipated games of all time. With the massive success of GTA 5 and over 13 years since its release, GTA 6 has got fans pretty excited. However, before the pre-orders went live, fans noticed something. The game would not be releasing physically to avoid leaks. This was understandably upsetting, as Rockstar physical releases were some of the best. A full manual, a map, a poster, it was always a joy to see what you got in the box. And GTA 6? Nothing. The game would still get a box release, but the game itself would just be a download code. This, unsurprisingly, upset a lot of people. Rockstar was the one company people thought wouldn't do something like this, and them doing this was one of the final nails in the coffin. While some people tried to fight it, too many people just pre-ordered the digital version, making it all but useless. Now, while some rumours arose about a later physical release, Rockstar later squashed these rumours. I understand why Rockstar did this. GTA 6 is one of the most anticipated games of all time. They don't want leaks, but still. And if it all wasn't bad enough, Sony announced they would stop all physical game production after 2028, effectively killing physical game. That and Xbox announcing that the next device, Project Helix, would allow you to make your physical games digital by playing them, makes the end less of a bad thought and more of a depressing reality. Physical video games is part of the medium, is part of the culture. There's used video game stores everywhere, hundreds of games for dirt cheap. And that's definitely one of the reasons Sony's getting rid of physical games. They don't have to compete with the physical version, which is going to be worth pennies in a year's time. It's also a valid concern that since you don't own your games, they can be taken away at a moment's notice. Recently, over 500 movies were taken off the PlayStation movie program. These were stripped from users' accounts due to them losing the rights, and none of the consumers got their money back. Speaking of movies, a lot of this probably has to do with them. The fact that most people stream their movies, barely anyone buys DVDs or Blu-rays anymore. Now, I personally still collect DVDs and Blu-rays, but that's really only if I really like a film. Of course, other than this crap. The reason Sony is stopping the production of physical games is because most consumers buy games digitally anyway, so they don't see the point. Which kinda makes sense from their perspective, but come on, getting rid of physical games entirely is just not fair to people like me who buy games physically. The end of physical video games is really sad, but it's what companies want. They want you only buying games from them so they make the most money. It's just basic money making. But fruit companies should not follow suit, and I heard the next banana release is in 20 minutes, so my scalping hobby can finally continue. I must go now! Yeah, so turns out they're also only being released digitally. But with my purchase, I got a copy of GTA 6. Sick, right? Let me put the code in. Oh, son of a bitch, the code's already been redeemed.